The hallway outside the private maternity suite smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, but Eleanor Whitman barely noticed. Her body still ached from childbirth, every step slow and fragile, yet something deeper than pain had pulled her out of bed. Instinct. Or maybe it was the quiet. Her newborn son, Oliver, had just been taken for routine checks. For the first time in hours, her arms were empty, and somehow, that felt wrong. Too wrong. She moved carefully down the corridor, one hand pressed against the wall for support. The soft hum of machines, distant footsteps, muted voices, it all blurred together. Until she heard him. Adrian. His voice was low, relaxed. Familiar. Eleanor froze. "I'm exhausted," he said with a soft laugh. "This whole thing, it's been a mess." Her heart skipped. A pause. Then another voice. Female. Smooth. Calm. "Sienna." "I know," she said gently. "You've done more than enough." Eleanor felt something tighten in her chest, but she didn't move. She didn't breathe. Adrian exhaled, like a man finally unburdened. "I just want to go home," he said. Another pause, then the sentence that changed everything. "To my real family." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed quietly, precisely, like a blade sliding between ribs. Eleanor's fingers curled against the cold wall. For a second, she waited. She actually waited. For him to laugh. To correct himself. To say her name. To say their son's name. He didn't. Instead, Sienna's voice came again, softer this time, almost intimate. "You deserve that." Adrian let out a breath of relief. "You're the only one who understands me." Something inside Eleanor went still. Not shattered. Not broken. Still. The kind of stillness that comes right before something irreversible. Behind her, a distant cry echoed from the nursery, her baby's voice, small and searching. Eleanor closed her eyes. 2 years. 2 years of leaving her career behind, of moving to Manhattan for his ambition, of nights spent alone in a luxury apartment that never felt like home, of believing that patience meant love. And now, standing barefoot in a hospital hallway, she understood the truth with terrifying clarity. She hadn't been building a family. She had been slowly erased from one. Eleanor didn't walk into that room. She didn't confront him. She didn't beg. Instead, she turned around, step by step, back toward her son. Because in that moment, one thing became certain. The next time Adrian saw her, she wouldn't be standing beside him. The apartment overlooking the Manhattan skyline was exactly what Eleanor Whitman once thought success looked like. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft, neutral tones, a kitchen island made of marble that never held a real meal, just coffee cups and silence. Now it felt like a showroom no one lived in, or maybe just not her. Days blurred together after she brought Oliver home. Time no longer moved in hours, but in feedings, diaper changes, and the soft, fragile sounds of a newborn trying to understand the world. Eleanor moved slowly, her body still healing, her mind somewhere far behind her. She learned how to cradle Oliver with one arm while warming a bottle with the other. She learned how to sleep sitting up, how to cry without making a sound. Adrian returned home late every night. When he did, he carried the city in with him, sharp, distracted, untouchable. His suit jacket landed on the same chair. His phone never left his hand. His voice came in fragments. "How's the baby?" "He hasn't slept," Eleanor said quietly one night. "Neither have I." Adrian nodded, already scrolling through emails on his iPhone. "You should rest," he replied. I've got an early meeting. That was it. No follow-up, no eye contact, no, "Are you okay?" Eleanor stopped expecting it. Visitors came during the first week. Flowers filled the living room. White lilies, orchids, carefully arranged congratulations from people who had never once asked how she felt. Sienna sent a gift basket. Elegant, expensive, with a note that read, "Congratulations to your family." Eleanor stared at that card longer than she should have before throwing it in the trash. Her body ached. Her hands trembled. Some mornings she couldn't tell if the heaviness in her chest was exhaustion or something deeper. Adrian didn't notice, or didn't care to. One afternoon, Eleanor tried to order diapers and formula. She opened their shared bank account on her MacBook. Password incorrect. She tried again, and again. Access denied. Her stomach dropped. She reached for the credit card. Declined. By the time Adrian walked through the door that evening, she was standing in the kitchen, Oliver asleep against her shoulder. "The accounts," she said carefully. "I can't access them." Adrian didn't even look surprised. "I reorganized things," he said, loosening his tie. "It's temporary. You don't need to worry about money right now." Eleanor blinked. "But I said it's handled," he cut in, sharper this time. "Focus on the baby." The baby, not their son. Not Oliver. Just the baby. That night, Eleanor stood by the window, Oliver in her arms, the city lights flickering endlessly below. Manhattan looked alive, powerful, certain. She felt none of it, because for the first time, Eleanor Whitman understood something no one had told her. She wasn't being protected. She was being replaced, and the most dangerous part? Adrian believed she was too broken to notice. The first real crack didn't come with shouting. It came quietly. Like everything else in Eleanor's life lately, it was a Thursday afternoon. Oliver had finally fallen asleep after hours of restless crying. His tiny fingers still curled into the fabric of her sweatshirt. Eleanor moved carefully, easing herself onto the edge of the bed, afraid even her breathing might wake him. The apartment was unusually still. Adrian had left early that morning, barely saying goodbye. Something about back-to-back meetings. She didn't question it anymore. Instead, she focused on small things: laundry, bottles, survival. That's when she found it. His jacket lay draped over the chair, the same way he always left it. Careless, predictable. Eleanor picked it up without thinking, checking the pockets out of habit before tossing it aside. Her fingers brushed against something folded, a receipt. She almost didn't look, but something, maybe instinct, maybe the echo of that hospital hallway, made her unfold it slowly. Midtown, an upscale restaurant, 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, dessert. Her chest tightened. The date, last Thursday. Eleanor's mind moved faster than her body could keep up. Last Thursday. Adrian had come home late, said he was stuck in meetings, said he barely had time to eat. She stared at the numbers again, as if they might rearrange themselves into something harmless. They didn't. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to breathe. Calm, quiet, careful. She folded the receipt exactly the way she found it and slipped it back into his pocket. No confrontation. Not yet. That night, she watched him from across the kitchen island. Adrian sat with his laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. Focused, controlled, untouchable. "How was your meeting?" she asked softly. "Fine," he said without looking up. "With who?" A pause, too quick to be natural. "Clients, that was all." Eleanor nodded, turning away before he could see the shift in her expression. Later, Oliver stirred in his crib, letting out a small cry. Eleanor moved to pick him up. rocking him gently against her chest. That's when she heard it, a soft buzz. Adrian's phone, left face down on the counter. The screen lit up briefly. She didn't mean to look. She really didn't. But her eyes caught the name before the light faded. Sienna. Just one word. But it was enough. Eleanor didn't touch the phone, didn't open the message, didn't need to. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the late nights, the softness in his voice that was never meant for her anymore. Standing there in the dim kitchen light, her son in her arms, Eleanor felt something inside her settle into place. Not heartbreak, not shock, clarity. And for the first time, she stopped asking herself if something was wrong, because now she knew. Something had been wrong for a long time. She had just been the last to see it. And the most dangerous part? She wasn't going to ask him to explain. She was going to let him keep talking. And this time, she was going to remember everything. Eleanor hadn't planned to go. The invitation had arrived weeks ago. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, a midtown address that whispered money and influence. Adrian had placed it on the counter without comment. "It's optional," he said. "You'll be tired. It's not your scene right now." That alone had been enough to make her curious. So she went. The dress didn't fit the same. It was a simple black piece she'd worn before the pregnancy, now tighter in some places, looser in others. Her body still felt unfamiliar, but she didn't try to hide it. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to see. The venue was all glass and low lighting, soft music weaving through quiet conversations. Waiters moved like shadows, carrying champagne flutes and small plates that no one seemed to eat. Eleanor stepped inside and immediately felt it. The shift, the way people glanced, then looked away. The way she didn't quite belong anymore. And then she saw him. Adrian stood near the center of the room, perfectly composed, a drink in his hand, his posture relaxed in a way she hadn't seen at home in months. He looked lighter. That was what hurt the most. For a brief second, his eyes found hers. He froze, just for a moment. Then he smiled, polite, distant, like she was someone he used to know. "You're here," he said as she approached. "I wanted to get out," Eleanor replied calmly. That's when she noticed her. Sienna Blake stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm as if it belonged there. She wasn't overly glamorous. No dramatic entrance, no obvious attempt to dominate the room. But there was something about her, composed, effortless, dangerous in a quiet way. Sienna turned, her smile warm, almost kind. "You must be Eleanor," she said. "Adrian's told me so much about you." Eleanor held her gaze. "Has he?" Sienna's expression didn't falter. "Of course," she said softly. "You've been through a lot." The words landed gently, too gently. Adrian cleared his throat. "Sienna works with some of our partners." Eleanor nodded, still watching her. "That must keep you busy." Sienna let out a small laugh. "Busy enough." They stood there, the three of them, surrounded by quiet wealth and polished conversation. But none of it mattered, because Eleanor saw it now. The way Adrian leaned slightly toward Sienna when she spoke. The way his shoulders relaxed. The way his eyes softened. Something they hadn't done for her in months. There was no tension, no secrecy, just familiarity, practice. Sienna excused herself shortly after, leaving them alone. "She seems nice," Eleanor said. Adrian didn't answer immediately. "Don't read into things," he said finally. "It's work." Eleanor nodded. Of course it was. Everything always was. But as she turned away, one truth settled quietly inside her. Sienna wasn't a possibility. She wasn't a threat. She was already part of his life. And Eleanor was already being written out of it. Eleanor didn't mean to hear it. That was the part that stayed with her later. The way it wasn't planned, wasn't dramatic, wasn't even loud. It just happened. Oliver had finally fallen asleep against her chest, his small breaths warm and steady. Eleanor moved slowly down the hallway, careful not to wake him, heading toward the nursery. That's when she stopped. Adrian's office door was slightly open. Just enough. His voice slipped through the narrow gap, low and unguarded in a way it hadn't been with her in months. "I can't keep doing this," he said. Eleanor froze. Her body went completely still. There was a pause, then Sienna's voice, soft, patient. "Then don't." Silence stretched for a second. Then Adrian let out a quiet laugh. "That's the point," he said. "I'm done pretending." Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly around Oliver's blanket. Her heart didn't race. It didn't break. It slowed. "The baby complicates things," Sienna added carefully. "The baby, not Oliver, not his son, just the baby." Adrian didn't hesitate. "No," he said. "He doesn't." Eleanor felt the words before she understood them. "He's just something that happened." The sentence landed without force. No anger, no hesitation, just truth. Eleanor's breath caught, but she didn't move. She didn't make a sound. She didn't give herself away, because something inside her had already begun to shift. "You're my real life," Adrian continued, his voice softer now. "You're the one I actually want." Sienna didn't respond right away. When she did, her tone was quieter. "What about Eleanor?" Adrian exhaled, almost annoyed. "She'll be fine," he said. "She always is." Eleanor closed her eyes. "She's good at surviving," he added. "That's what she does." That was the moment. Not the affair, not the lies, not even the word real family. This was the moment everything ended. Because in a single sentence, Adrian hadn't just dismissed her. He had defined her. Someone who endures. Someone who adapts. Someone who stays. Eleanor turned away, slowly, carefully. She walked back into the nursery and laid Oliver down in his crib. He stirred slightly, his tiny hand reaching out instinctively before settling again. Unaware. Safe. For now. Eleanor stood there, watching him breathe. And for the first time in days, her mind felt clear. No confusion, no questions, no hope left to protect. She walked to the desk, opened her laptop, and sat down. The screen glowed softly in the dim room. Her fingers hovered for a moment, then began to move. Dates, times, conversations, patterns, every detail she could remember, laid out with quiet precision. Not emotion, not accusation. Just truth. In the bedroom, Adrian moved around as if nothing had changed. He didn't check on her, didn't ask where she was, didn't notice. Eleanor didn't expect him to, because tonight, she understood something he never would. She wasn't breaking. She was waking up, and this time, she wasn't going to survive him. She was going to outgrow him. The next morning, Eleanor Whitman moved through the apartment as if nothing had changed. That was what made it dangerous. Adrian noticed the quiet immediately, but he misunderstood it, the same way he always had. He thought it meant weakness. He thought it meant she was processing, adjusting, folding herself smaller to survive the life he had already decided for her. So he relaxed. Eleanor fed Oliver, her movements slow and steady. She washed bottles, folded laundry, and answered Adrian's questions with short, agreeable responses. Yes. No, it's fine. I'm okay. She didn't mention the conversation. She didn't mention Sienna. She didn't mention the sentence that had quietly ended everything. Adrian moved through the morning like a man whose decisions had already been accepted. He poured coffee into a sleek black mug, checked market updates on his iPad, and spoke about meetings as if the word "we" still applied to them. "We might need a bigger place soon," he said casually. "Something closer to the office." Eleanor nodded. Of course. Inside, something else was happening. She began waking before dawn, not from anxiety, from clarity. While Oliver slept against her chest, Eleanor opened a notebook she hadn't touched in years. The pages were blank, waiting. She didn't write feelings. She wrote facts. Dates Adrian came home late. Times he avoided her. Every moment his story didn't align with reality. Her memory had always been sharp. She had just never needed to use it like this before. Later that afternoon, she opened a drawer she hadn't looked in since before the pregnancy. Inside was an old, external hard drive. Adrian had once asked her to keep it safe. Back when he trusted her. Back when he needed her. Eleanor plugged it into her laptop, her fingers steady despite the weight of what she might find. Folders appeared. Archived reports, old financial models, data she had helped organize years ago, back when Adrian was still building his reputation. Back when he used to call her brilliant. She opened one file, then another. Patterns, corrections, notes in her own handwriting, embedded in documents Adrian had later presented as his own. Eleanor leaned back slightly, her mind already connecting pieces. Not revenge, structure. That evening, Adrian stood in the doorway, watching her quietly. "I appreciate you not making this harder than it needs to be," he said. Eleanor looked up at him and smiled faintly. He didn't understand. He thought her silence was surrender. He thought her calm meant compliance. He didn't realize. The silence wasn't empty. It was strategic. And the woman he believed was too exhausted to fight back had already started building something he would never see coming. The shift came quietly. Too quietly. Eleanor noticed it in the way Adrian's tone softened over the next few days, like someone carefully adjusting a performance. He asked if she was sleeping enough. He offered to hold Oliver for a few minutes while she showered. He even suggested they take a walk together, just the three of them, like a family. It was almost convincing, almost. But Eleanor had already learned something Adrian didn't realize she knew. Kindness from him was never random. It was timed, measured, strategic, and it always came before something else. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, custody evaluation notice. Eleanor stared at the screen on her laptop, her fingers going cold as she opened it. A family law firm. Not one she had contacted. Not one she recognized. Her name. Adrian's name. Their son. Oliver. The language was formal, clean, clinical, assessment of parental stability, review of caregiving environment, recommendations for custodial arrangement. Eleanor read it twice. Then a third time. Each word settled heavier than the last. This wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a discussion. It was a move. That night, Adrian finally addressed it. Oliver was asleep. The apartment was quiet. The city outside pulsed with life that had nothing to do with hers. Adrian sat across from her at the kitchen island, posture straight, expression composed, prepared. "I think we need to be realistic," he said calmly. Eleanor didn't respond. "You've been through a lot," he continued. "Postpartum recovery isn't easy. Courts take that seriously." Her chest tightened, but her face didn't change. "I'm not unstable," she said carefully. Adrian sighed, like she was missing the point. It's not about what you think, he replied. It's about what can be proven. There it was. Not concern, not care. Positioning. He slid a folder across the marble surface toward her. Inside, printed documents, medical articles, highlighted phrases, emotional adjustment, fatigue, instability, words that could be shaped into something dangerous. I'm trying to protect Oliver, Adrian added smoothly. You don't have income right now. You're exhausted. This isn't about you. It's about what's best for him. Eleanor looked down at the papers, then back at him. Our son, she said quietly. Adrian didn't correct himself. He didn't need to. Look, he continued, leaning forward slightly. You don't need a lawyer. We can keep this amicable. Amicable. The word felt sharp, wrapped in reason, but underneath, it was a threat. Eleanor closed the folder slowly, her hands steady despite the storm building beneath her calm. So this is how you see me, she said. Adrian held her gaze. This is how the system will see you, he answered. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, final. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat on the floor beside Oliver's crib, her back against the wall, watching his tiny chest rise and fall in the soft glow of the nightlight. Fear came, real, sharp. Adrian had money, lawyers, a narrative. She had none of those things. Just a healing body, a quiet mind, and a child who depended on her for everything. But fear didn't break her. It refined her. Because as Eleanor sat there in the stillness, one truth became clear. Adrian wasn't just ending their marriage. He was trying to erase her completely. And this time, she wasn't going to let him. Adrian didn't raise his voice when he told her to leave. He didn't need to. It was a Friday evening. The city outside glowed gold against the glass windows, Manhattan alive and indifferent, as if nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. Eleanor stood in the living room, Oliver resting against her chest, his small body warm and trusting. Adrian remained near the doorway, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone. Calm, detached. I think some space would be good, he said. Eleanor looked at him slowly. For who? She asked. For everyone, Adrian replied, as if the answer were obvious. The words were measured, practiced. I'll cover everything, he continued. It'll look better if you're not overwhelmed here. Look better, not feel better, not be better. Just look. Eleanor's grip tightened slightly around Oliver. This is my home, she said quietly. Adrian's expression shifted, just slightly. Legally, he said, it's mine. The sentence landed heavier than anything else. Not louder, just final. He stepped forward and handed her a small envelope. Inside, a prepaid card, a printed list of short-term rentals, addresses, phone numbers, options, like she was a problem being relocated. You can come back for the rest of your things later, he added. There's no reason for this to get messy. Messy. Eleanor nodded once. Not in agreement, in understanding. She turned without another word. There was nothing left to say. Packing didn't take long. A small suitcase, Oliver's clothes, a few essentials, his favorite blanket. The life she had built here, carefully, quietly, was reduced to what she could carry in one trip. Adrian stood near the door the entire time, occasionally glancing at his phone, already disconnected from the moment, already somewhere else. When Eleanor reached the door, she paused. Not because she wanted to stay, because she needed to remember. You're making a mistake, she said. Adrian let out a soft breath, almost amused. You'll understand later. Eleanor didn't respond, because for the first time, she already did. The elevator ride down was silent, each floor passing like a countdown. Oliver shifted slightly in her arms, letting out a soft sound before settling again. She pressed her cheek gently against his head, grounding herself, holding on to the only thing that mattered. When the doors opened to the lobby, the doorman glanced at her bags, then away, trained not to see. Outside, the city hit her all at once. Cold air, taxi lights, voices, life continuing without pause. Eleanor stood there for a moment. Just one, not lost, not broken, just recalibrating. Then she adjusted her grip on Oliver and stepped forward. No destination, no plan, only movement. Because staying was no longer an option. And going back was no longer who she was. That night, Eleanor Whitman disappeared from Adrian's controlled world. He believed he had removed her gently, cleanly, efficiently. What he didn't understand was that he had just given her exactly what she needed: distance, silence, and the freedom to become someone he could never control again. By Monday morning, Adrian Cole realized something was wrong. Eleanor hadn't called. She hadn't texted. She hadn't asked for money, for help, or even for her belongings. The prepaid card he gave her remained untouched. The list of rentals, unused. For a woman he believed couldn't function without him, her silence was unsettling. At first, he told himself it was temporary, emotional, dramatic. "She'll come back," he muttered, scrolling through his phone, irritation creeping in. "She has nowhere else to go." But by the second day, that confidence began to crack. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Emails unanswered. No activity on their shared accounts. No trace. Eleanor Whitman had vanished. Clean, precise, intentional. Adrian drove past 2 of the addresses he had suggested, half expecting to see her there. Tired, overwhelmed, waiting to be rescued. She wasn't. By the 3rd day, irritation turned into something else. Something tighter, less comfortable. A loss of control he couldn't name. "She's withholding the child," he snapped during a call with his attorney. There was a pause on the other end. "Has she contacted you at all?" the attorney asked carefully. "No." "Then we need to be cautious. Disappearance isn't the same as negligence." Adrian ended the call, jaw tight. He didn't like uncertainty. He liked systems, predictability, control. And Eleanor had just stepped completely outside of all 3. Miles away, the world felt different, quieter, slower, real. Eleanor stood on the edge of a narrow shoreline, the wind brushing against her face as waves rolled in steadily, endlessly. Oliver slept peacefully in a borrowed crib inside the small rental house behind her. The place wasn't impressive. No marble, no skyline. Just clean floors, soft light, and space to breathe. For the first time since giving birth, Eleanor slept more than 2 hours at a time. She didn't check her phone constantly, didn't wait for footsteps, didn't brace for disappointment. She moved through her days with quiet intention. Morning walks by the water, simple meals, long stretches of silence that no longer felt heavy. She wasn't hiding. She was resetting. And while Adrian searched for her inside the systems he understood, Eleanor was building something outside of them. On the 4th day, she opened her old laptop at the small kitchen table. The screen flickered to life slowly, untouched by Adrian's network, his passwords, his reach. She stared at it for a long moment, then began typing. Not a message to Adrian, not a plea, not an explanation, a single email. Carefully written, measured, direct, addressed to one person, Daniel Cross. She read it once, then sent it. Outside, The ocean continued its steady rhythm, indifferent to everything she had left behind. Eleanor closed the laptop and leaned back slightly, Oliver's soft breathing filling the quiet space beside her. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it. Not fear, not pain, control. Because Adrian thought her disappearance meant weakness, but he was about to learn the truth. She hadn't disappeared to escape him. She had stepped away, so she could finally move without him seeing it coming. Daniel Cross didn't reply immediately. Eleanor expected that. Men like him didn't rush. They measured, assessed, calculated, especially when someone from the past appeared without warning. So she didn't follow up. She didn't send a second email. She simply waited. 3 hours later, her laptop chimed softly. One new message, from Daniel. She opened it without hesitation. I was wondering when you'd resurface. Eleanor exhaled slowly. No surprise, no confusion, just recognition. They hadn't spoken in years, but Daniel had always been sharp. Back when Adrian was still climbing, when success wasn't guaranteed, Daniel had been the one person who noticed Eleanor's work. Really noticed. You were always the one behind the structure. His email continued. What do you need? Not how are you? Not what happened. Straight to the point. Eleanor respected that. She typed carefully. Not emotional, not defensive. Clear. I need leverage. She hesitated for a second before adding, and I have something you'll want to see. This time, the response came faster. Call me. Eleanor glanced at Oliver, asleep nearby, then reached for her phone. The line rang once. Eleanor Whitman, Daniel said, his voice calm but unmistakably interested. You don't disappear for years and come back asking for leverage unless something serious happened. It did, she replied. A pause. Then, Adrian? Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm listening. Eleanor stood by the window as she spoke, watching the ocean stretch endlessly ahead. He's building a custody case, she said. Positioning me as unstable, no income, postpartum. Daniel didn't interrupt. But that's not why I reached out, she continued. That's just what forced me to. Silence, then quieter. What did you find? Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. Old files, she said. From before he made partner, financial models, adjustments that don't match final reports. Daniel's tone shifted. Subtle, but immediate. You're sure? I built half of them, she replied evenly. I know what they're supposed to look like. That was the truth Adrian had forgotten. He had outgrown her position, but not her mind. Daniel let out a slow breath. If what you're saying is accurate, he said. This doesn't just give you leverage. Eleanor didn't respond. She already knew. This changes his entire risk profile, Daniel continued. Not illegal on its own, but enough to trigger a deeper review. Exactly. That was the point. Not destruction. Pressure. Send me everything, Daniel said. Eleanor looked back at Oliver. Small, peaceful, safe. I will, she said quietly, but not all at once. Daniel paused, then a faint hint of approval entered his voice. Good, he said. You learned. The call ended. Eleanor set the phone down slowly. For the first time since she walked out of that apartment, something shifted again. Not fear, not survival, position. Because Adrian thought he had removed her from the board. What he didn't realize was that she had just made her first move, and this time, she was playing to win. Eleanor didn't send everything at once. That was the mistake Adrian would have made. Too fast, too obvious, too easy to trace. Instead, she worked slowly, deliberately. Every morning, after feeding Oliver and placing him gently in his crib by the window, she sat at the small kitchen table with her laptop open and the external drive beside it. The ocean moved quietly outside. Inside, Eleanor built something far more dangerous. A pattern. At first glance, the files looked harmless. Old reports, archived projections, investment models Adrian had presented years ago when he was still earning his reputation. But Eleanor knew where to look. She always had. Numbers weren't just numbers to her. They told stories, and Adrian's story didn't line up. She opened one file, then another, cross-referencing timelines, comparing versions, checking revisions against final submissions. Small adjustments, subtle, easy to overlook, but consistent. Too consistent. Certain projections had been softened just enough to reduce perceived risk. Certain losses had been shifted forward, technically within acceptable margins, but strategically misleading. And certain partners benefited more than they should have. Eleanor leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing as the structure became clearer. This wasn't sloppy work. It was intentional, careful, layered over time, not illegal on its own. But together, it painted a picture. The kind that made compliance departments uncomfortable. The kind that made investors ask questions. The kind that turned confidence into doubt. Eleanor exhaled slowly. This was bigger than she expected, and suddenly the stakes felt different. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore, she was holding something that could shift Adrian's entire foundation. Her phone buzzed lightly on the table. A message from Daniel. "Send the first set." Eleanor didn't respond right away. Instead, she selected 3 files, not the strongest, not the weakest. Just enough. Enough to raise a question. Enough to open a door. She attached them carefully, double-checking every detail before hitting send. Then she waited. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Oliver stirred softly behind her, letting out a small sound before settling again. Eleanor stood, adjusted his blanket, then returned to the table. Her laptop chimed. Daniel. She opened the message. 2 words. "Well played." Eleanor allowed herself the smallest exhale. Not relief. Confirmation. Another message followed. "This isn't random," Daniel added. "This is a pattern." Yes, that was the point. Eleanor closed the laptop slowly, her fingers resting on the edge of the table. For years, Adrian had believed she was part of his past. A role he had outgrown. A woman who had stepped aside so he could rise. What he never understood was that she had been watching, learning, remembering, and now, piece by piece, she was putting his story back together, the way it actually happened. And once the full picture surfaced, there would be no way for him to control it again. The courtroom was colder than Eleanor expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. Everything felt controlled, measured, stripped of emotion. Exactly the kind of place Adrian thrived in. He arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his posture confident, his expression calm. His legal team stood beside him, flipping through documents with quiet efficiency. To them, this was simple: a financially stable father, a postpartum mother with no income, a predictable outcome. Eleanor walked in alone. No dramatic entrance, no attempt to impress. Just a neutral coat, minimal makeup, and Oliver resting quietly in his carrier against her chest. She didn't look fragile. She didn't look desperate. She looked steady. Adrian noticed, and for the first time, something in his expression tightened. That wasn't what he expected. When the hearing began, his attorney took the lead. Measured voice, carefully chosen words. They spoke of concern, of stability, of ensuring the child's best interest. They referenced Eleanor's exhaustion, her lack of financial independence, the emotional strain of recent events. It sounded reasonable, convincing, almost compassionate. Eleanor listened without interrupting, without reacting, without giving them anything. Then it was her turn. Her attorney stood, calm, precise, and instead of emotion, he began with facts: employment history, educational background, past consulting work, then documentation. Files Eleanor had helped build years ago, data models, strategic corrections, evidence that she had not only supported Adrian's early success, but strengthened it. The room shifted, subtly but noticeably. This wasn't part of Adrian's narrative. Her attorney continued. My client did not abandon stability, he said. She was removed from it. Adrian's jaw tightened. She did not disappear, the attorney added. She acted to protect her child from an environment of control and financial restriction. No raised voices, no accusations, just structure. Then came the moment Adrian didn't expect. The attorney referenced an internal compliance review at Adrian's firm, not as an attack, as context. Given the current professional uncertainty surrounding Mr. Cole, he said, granting sole custody would introduce unnecessary instability. Adrian's head snapped slightly. That wasn't supposed to be here. That wasn't supposed to exist yet. Eleanor didn't look at him. She didn't need to, because for the first time, he understood. This wasn't a reaction. This was preparation. The judge leaned forward slightly. Mr. Cole, she said, can you clarify your current work status? Adrian opened his mouth and for the first time in years, hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. When Eleanor was asked to speak, her voice didn't shake. She spoke about Oliver, his feeding schedule, his sleep, his doctor visits, his needs, simple, grounded, real. No strategy, just truth. And somehow, that carried more weight than anything Adrian's side had presented. When the hearing ended, no decision was announced. But something had already changed. Outside the courtroom, Adrian stepped toward her. You planned this, he said quietly. Eleanor adjusted Oliver's blanket. I prepared, she replied. Then she walked past him, and for the first time, Adrian wasn't sure he was still in control. Sienna Blake noticed the shift before Adrian did. She always did. It started small. A delayed reply, a canceled dinner, a conversation cut short with, I'll call you later, that never came. At first, she didn't question it. Men like Adrian lived in cycles, busy, distracted, consumed by their own importance. But this felt different. His attention wasn't just elsewhere, it was fractured. One evening, they sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where power moved silently between tables. Sienna watched him as he checked his phone for the third time in under a minute. Not for her, for something else. What's going on? She asked lightly, setting down her glass. Adrian barely looked up. Nothing, he said. Just work. Sienna smiled faintly. That answer used to be enough. It wasn't anymore. She leaned back slightly, studying him. You're distracted, she said. And not in the usual way. Adrian exhaled, irritation slipping through. It's just internal review stuff. Temporary. Internal review. There it was. Sienna didn't react immediately, but inside, something recalculated. What kind of review? She asked casually. Nothing serious, Adrian replied quickly. Just compliance. Too quick, too controlled. Sienna nodded slowly, as if satisfied. But her mind was already moving ahead. She had built her life on reading risk, and Adrian was becoming one. Over the next few days, she paid closer attention. The way his name came up less often in conversations. The subtle pauses when colleagues mentioned his firm. The polite smiles that lingered just a second too long. And then, the silence. People stopped asking about his next move. In her world, that meant one thing: uncertainty. And uncertainty was dangerous. One afternoon, Sienna sat in a quiet cafe, her phone pressed lightly against her ear. "I need clarity," she said softly. The voice on the other end responded in low, careful tones. "He's under review. Not public, but not minor either." Sienna's fingers tapped lightly against the table. "How long?" "Long enough to matter." She ended the call without another word. That was all she needed. That evening, Adrian texted her. "Dinner tonight?" She stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. "Can't. Busy. Simple, neutral, final." Over the next week, she pulled away carefully. No confrontation, no accusations, just distance. She stopped leaving things at his apartment, stopped answering late-night calls, stopped making space for him in her future. Adrian noticed, but too late. By the time he reached for her, she was already gone. "I can't be part of something unstable," she told him during their last conversation. "I need consistency." The word hit harder than she intended, or maybe exactly as intended, because for the first time, Adrian understood what it felt like: to be evaluated, to be weighed, and to be found lacking. Sienna didn't leave in anger. She left in calculation. And in doing so, she became the very thing Adrian had always been. Someone who only stayed when it benefited them. And now, he no longer did. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It never does. For Adrian Cole, it came in small, controlled fractures. The kind that didn't make noise, but changed everything. At the office, the first sign was subtle. Meetings he usually led were reassigned. At first he assumed it was temporary. Scheduling conflicts, internal adjustments, nothing worth questioning. But then came the second shift. Emails that once came directly to him now included others. Copied, reviewed, filtered. His decisions, once final, now required confirmation. That was new and dangerous. Adrian sat at his desk, staring at the glass walls of his corner office, the Manhattan skyline stretching confidently beyond them. It used to feel like power. Now it felt like exposure. His assistant knocked lightly before stepping in. "There's been a change," she said carefully. "The investor briefing this afternoon, they've asked Daniel Harris to lead instead." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Why?" She hesitated. "They said it would be more appropriate given the current review." There it was again. The review. No one explained it. No one challenged him directly. But it was everywhere, in the pauses, in the tone shifts, in the way people no longer met his eyes for too long. Later that day, he walked into a conference room mid-conversation. The room fell silent, too quickly, then resumed, too carefully. Adrian didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He understood. The narrative had started to move without him, and once that happened, control became an illusion. That evening, he returned to the apartment. The silence greeted him immediately. No footsteps, no soft sounds, no life. Sienna's absence lingered in a different way now. Not emotional, strategic. Her things were gone. No explanation, no argument. Just absence. Adrian walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. Half empty, like she had never been there, like none of it had been real. He let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had planned everything, structured everything, controlled every variable. And yet, something had shifted beyond his reach. His phone buzzed. A message from his attorney. "Second hearing scheduled. We need to adjust strategy." Adjust. Another word that meant loss of control. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen. For the first time in years, he didn't have a clear move. Didn't have certainty. Didn't have leverage. Across the state, Eleanor sat at a small wooden table, papers spread neatly in front of her. Oliver slept nearby, his soft breathing filling the quiet space. She moved calmly, methodically, reviewing documents, responding to emails, building something piece by piece. No panic, no rush, because while Adrian's world was beginning to crack, Eleanor's was finally stabilizing. And the most dangerous part? She wasn't reacting anymore. She was directing. And Adrian was already too far behind to catch up. The call came when Eleanor wasn't expecting it. Late afternoon. The ocean was quieter that day, the sky pale and stretched thin across the horizon. Oliver had just fallen asleep, his small hand curled around her finger before letting go. Eleanor stepped outside, her phone still in her hand, staring at the unfamiliar number. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. Then she answered. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then a voice, older, composed, unmistakably controlled. "Eleanor, this is Margaret Cole." Eleanor's body went still. Adrian's mother, of all people. "I didn't expect you to pick up," Margaret added. "I wasn't sure I would," Eleanor replied honestly. Silence lingered between them, heavy with everything that didn't need to be said. I won't take much of your time," Margaret continued, "but there are things you need to know." Eleanor didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. She simply listened. "I raised Adrian to believe control was strength," Margaret said quietly. "That success justified everything else." A pause. "That was my mistake." Eleanor's grip tightened slightly on the phone. Margaret exhaled. "I've been following what's happening. The custody case. The review at his firm." Eleanor's heart beat once, hard, but her voice stayed steady. "And?" "And you're not wrong," Margaret said. The words landed differently than Eleanor expected. Not validation, something deeper. "I've seen the way he handles pressure," Margaret continued. "The choices he makes when he thinks no one is watching." Another pause. Then, "I also know where some of those choices started." Eleanor's breath slowed. "What are you saying?" she asked carefully. Margaret didn't hesitate. "I have documents," she said. "Old ones, before he made partner, before everything was cleaned up." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "You kept them?" "I didn't trust what I was seeing," Margaret replied. "And I didn't trust him to stop." The wind picked up slightly, brushing against Eleanor's face as she stepped farther from the house. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Margaret was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice softened. "Because I won't lose my grandson the way I lost my son." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "I should have stepped in earlier," Margaret continued. "But I didn't." Another pause. "I'm stepping in now." Eleanor said nothing. Because for the first time, this wasn't strategy. This was something else. Something unexpected. Something real. "I can send everything to your attorney," Margaret said. "But once I do, there's no going back." Eleanor looked toward the window where Oliver slept peacefully inside. Safe, unaware. "There's already no going back," she replied quietly. Margaret didn't argue. "Then I'll make sure you're not standing alone," she said. The line went silent. Eleanor lowered the phone slowly, her mind already shifting. Adrian had built his life on control, on structure, on the belief that he could manage every outcome. What he never expected was that the final piece wouldn't come from Eleanor. It would come from the one person who knew him before he became untouchable. And this time, even his own family had chosen the truth over him. The courtroom felt different this time, heavier, quieter, like something had already been decided before anyone spoke. Adrian felt it the moment he walked in. Eyes followed him, not openly, not with judgment, but with awareness, the kind that comes when people know more than they say. He sat beside his attorney, posture straight, expression controlled, but underneath, something had shifted. Eleanor entered moments later. No hesitation, no pause. Oliver rested calmly in her arms, his small presence grounding everything around her. She didn't look at Adrian. She didn't need to. The judge began with formalities, then moved directly to the point. "Mr. Cole," she said, "we need clarification regarding your current employment status." Adrian's attorney leaned forward. "My client remains employed," he said carefully. "However, there is an internal review." "How long has this review been ongoing?" the judge interrupted. Adrian answered before anyone else could. "Several weeks." "A mistake. Small, but irreversible." "And you chose not to disclose this during the previous hearing?" the judge asked. A pause. Too long. His attorney shifted slightly beside him. "We didn't believe it was relevant at the time," he said quickly. The judge made a note. That was enough. Eleanor's attorney stood calmly. No aggression, no performance. Just facts. He presented updated documentation, emails confirming Adrian's reduced authority, changes in leadership assignments, and statements indicating uncertainty within his firm. Then, the final piece. Documents Margaret Cole had provided. Older records, patterns that aligned with Eleanor's findings. Not accusations, not conclusions. Just evidence that raised serious questions about Adrian's professional integrity. The room shifted again. This time, it was undeniable. Adrian's control, gone. When it was Eleanor's turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice was steady, clear. She didn't mention betrayal, didn't mention Sienna, didn't mention the past. She spoke about Oliver, his routine, his health, his safety. "I'm not asking for anything more than stability," she said. "For him. No dramatics, no tears, just truth." And somehow, that carried more weight than everything Adrian had tried to construct. When Adrian spoke, his words felt different, less certain, less commanding. He talked about financial support, resources, capability. But the judge's focus had already shifted. "This court is not evaluating income alone," she said. "We are evaluating reliability." The word landed hard, final. The hearing ended without immediate ruling, but no one in the room needed one to understand. Outside, Adrian stood still as Eleanor walked past him. For a moment, he almost said something, almost reached out. But the distance between them was no longer physical. It was absolute. Eleanor adjusted Oliver's blanket and continued forward. Because this time, she wasn't walking away in fear. She was walking forward with certainty. And Adrian finally understood. He had already lost. The final collapse didn't come with headlines, no dramatic announcement, no public disgrace. For Adrian Cole, it came in silence, the kind that lingers longer than noise ever could. It started with one call. Short, formal. "Given the ongoing review, we're placing you on extended leave." Adrian stood in his kitchen, phone pressed against his ear, staring at the skyline he used to believe he owned. "This is temporary?" he asked. A pause. "We'll reassess." That wasn't an answer. That was an ending. The line went dead. Adrian lowered the phone slowly, his reflection staring back at him from the dark glass window. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. At the office, his access badge no longer opened certain floors. Meetings continued without him. Decisions were made in rooms he no longer entered. People didn't confront him. They adjusted around him, quietly, efficiently, like removing a piece from a system that had already learned how to function without it. That hurt more than any accusation, because it meant he was no longer necessary. Back at the apartment, the emptiness had settled in completely. No footsteps, no movement, no presence. Sienna was gone. Eleanor was gone. Even the illusion of control, gone. Adrian walked through the rooms slowly, each space feeling unfamiliar in its stillness. The couch where Eleanor once sat with Oliver. The kitchen where conversations used to happen. The bedroom that now felt like a place no one truly lived in. He stopped at the doorway, looked inside, and for a moment, he didn't move, because the silence there wasn't peaceful. It was deserved. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his attorney. Final custody ruling issued. Adrian's chest tightened. He opened it, read once, then again. Primary custody, Eleanor Whitman. Supervised visitation, Adrian Cole. The words blurred slightly as he lowered himself into a chair. Supervised, not limited, not shared. Supervised. He exhaled slowly, his hand running over his face. This wasn't negotiation. This wasn't temporary. This was consequence. Across the state, Eleanor read the same message while standing in her small kitchen, Oliver resting quietly in her arms. She didn't react immediately, didn't smile, didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes for a second and breathed, because everything she had fought for was now real. Back in Manhattan, Adrian stared at the screen long after the message faded. For the first time, there was nothing left to fix. No move to make. No system to control. No one to blame. Just the quiet understanding of something he had refused to see before. He hadn't lost everything at once. He had lost it, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hold on to. And this time, no one was coming back. The room was small. Neutral walls, soft lighting, a table placed carefully in the center, as if distance itself had been measured and approved. A court-appointed supervisor sat quietly in the corner, pen in hand, observing without emotion. Adrian Cole had never felt more exposed. He sat across from his son, Oliver. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, because nothing in his life had prepared him for this version of fatherhood. Scheduled, observed, conditional. "Go ahead," the supervisor said gently. "You can interact with him." Adrian nodded, his throat tight. He leaned forward slightly, reaching out. "Hey," he said softly. It's okay." Oliver looked at him, wide eyes, curious but not familiar. That realization hit harder than anything else. Adrian forced a small smile, trying again. "I'm your dad." The words sounded strange, unsteady, like they didn't belong to him anymore. Oliver blinked, then shifted slightly in his seat, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. There was no recognition, no comfort, just uncertainty. Adrian swallowed, his chest tightening. He reached out again, slower this time. "Come here," he murmured. Oliver hesitated, then turned his head toward the door, toward the sound of a voice outside. "Eleanor." She stepped in quietly, having been asked to remain nearby. The moment Oliver saw her, everything changed. His body relaxed. His arms lifted instinctively. A soft sound escaped him. Relief. trust. Eleanor moved forward, calm and steady, lifting him into her arms without hesitation. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice low and warm. Oliver settled immediately against her shoulder. Safe. Adrian sat frozen, because in that single moment, he understood something no courtroom could explain. This wasn't about legal rights, or financial stability, or who could provide more. It was about presence, consistency, safety, and he had chosen, again and again, to be absent. The supervisor made a small note on her clipboard. No judgment, just observation. Adrian looked down at his hands, then back at his son. But Oliver didn't look at him again. He didn't need to, because he had already chosen. Not consciously, not deliberately, but instinctively. He knew where he belonged, and it wasn't across that table. Adrian leaned back slowly, the weight settling in fully now. This was the consequence. Not the loss of status. Not the silence of his apartment. Not even the fall of his career. This, watching his own son feel safer in someone else's arms, and knowing he had created that distance himself. Eleanor didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Because for the first time, Adrian wasn't arguing, wasn't defending, wasn't controlling. He was just witnessing. And this time, there was nothing he could change. The house wasn't large, no skyline, no marble floors, no silent elevators carrying people who never made eye contact. Just sunlight, real sunlight, spilling through wide windows, warming the wooden floors as morning settled gently into the room. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a cup of coffee she had already forgotten to drink. Oliver sat in his high chair nearby, tapping a spoon against the tray with quiet determination, his laughter soft and unfiltered. The sound filled the space. Not noise, life. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. Eleanor moved slowly, but not from exhaustion anymore, from intention. Her days had found a rhythm now. Work in the mornings, her laptop open on a modest desk by the window, walks along the shoreline in the afternoon. Evenings filled with small, ordinary moments that no longer felt heavy. She didn't check her phone constantly, didn't wait for tension, didn't brace for disappointment. That part of her life was over. Completely. A soft knock came at the door. Eleanor glanced up, already knowing who it was. She opened it to find Noah Bennett standing there, hands tucked casually into his jacket pockets. "Morning," he said with a small smile. "Morning," she replied. Noah didn't step in right away. He never did. He waited, gave space. Something Eleanor had learned to notice and appreciate. "I brought those plans you asked about," he added, holding up a folded set of papers. The small renovation project she had taken on, her first independent contract since everything changed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. "Come in," she said. Noah stepped inside, glancing briefly toward Oliver. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. Oliver looked up, studying him for a second before returning to his spoon with quiet confidence. No fear, no hesitation, just curiosity. Eleanor noticed that too. They sat at the table, reviewing sketches, discussing materials, timelines. No pressure, no expectations, just conversation. And something underneath it. Steady, real. At one point, Oliver let out a small laugh, dropping his spoon onto the floor. Noah reached down instinctively, picking it up and handing it back without missing a beat. No hesitation, no discomfort, just presence. Eleanor watched that moment carefully, because it told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't rescue. This wasn't replacement. This was something entirely different. Something built slowly, honestly. Later that evening, after Noah had left, and Oliver had fallen asleep, Eleanor sat by the window, looking out at the quiet stretch of water. Her phone rested on the table beside her. A message from Adrian remained unread. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Because for the first time, she understood something clearly. Not every door needs to be reopened. Not every voice needs to be answered. Some chapters end, so better ones can begin. And this time, Eleanor wasn't rebuilding what she lost. She was creating something she had never had before. Peace. The first real sign that everything had changed didn't come with a milestone. No announcement, no dramatic moment. It came quietly, on an ordinary morning. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, sunlight stretching across the floor, as Oliver laughed in his high chair, his small hands reaching for nothing but joy. No fear, no confusion, just trust. She watched him for a moment longer than necessary, letting that feeling settle fully inside her. This was what she had fought for. Not victory, not revenge, safety. Later that day, she took him for a walk along the shoreline. The air was cool, the ocean steady, the world moving at a pace that finally matched her own. No rushing, no pressure, just presence. Her phone buzzed softly in her coat pocket. Eleanor paused. She already knew who it was. Adrian. She didn't need to check. She stood there for a moment, the wind brushing against her face, Oliver resting comfortably against her chest. Then slowly, she reached for the phone. One message, short, careful. "I'm sorry. I'd like to do better. For him." Eleanor read it once, then again. The words weren't wrong, but they weren't enough. Not anymore. She locked the screen and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Because some apologies arrive too late. Not because they aren't sincere, but because the damage has already reshaped everything. That evening, back at the house, Eleanor sat on the floor beside Oliver, watching him play. The room was filled with soft light, quiet laughter, and something she hadn't felt in years. Stability. A gentle knock came at the door. Noah. He stepped in with that same quiet presence and setting down a small bag of groceries on the counter. "I figured you might need these," he said. Eleanor smiled, not out of politeness, out of ease. "Thank you," she replied. Noah crouched slightly near Oliver, who looked up and smiled without hesitation. That simple moment, unforced, natural, said more than anything else ever could. Eleanor watched them for a second, then looked away, not because she needed distance, but because she finally understood something. Family wasn't something you declared. It wasn't something you replaced. It wasn't something you walked in and out of when it suited you. It was something you built. Day by day, choice by choice, presence by presence. Adrian had called someone else his real family, but in doing so, he had revealed he never understood what that meant. Eleanor stood slowly, crossing the room as the evening settled around them. Oliver reached for her. She lifted him easily, holding him close. Safe. Always safe. And as she looked around the life she had rebuilt, not perfect, not extravagant, but real, she felt something settle deeply within her. Not closure, something stronger. Peace. Because in the end, she didn't just walk away with her son, she walked away with her dignity, and this time, she was finally home. So, that's where our story comes to an end. And hey, if you're still here with me right now, truly still here, then I think something in this journey touched you. Maybe not loudly, maybe not all at once, but in a quiet, honest way. Because let's be real, life doesn't always break us in big, dramatic moments. Sometimes it's the small sentences, the quiet betrayals, the feeling of being unseen in a place you once called home. But here's the truth Eleanor showed us. You don't always win by fighting harder. Sometimes you win by choosing yourself and walking away. There's a line from Marcus Aurelius that says, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly it. Healing doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. It means you build something better, something honest, something safe. So if you've ever felt overlooked, replaced, or not enough, maybe this is your reminder. You don't need to beg for a place in someone's life. The right life won't make you feel invisible. And if this story meant something to you, even just a little, go ahead and like the video or share it with someone who might need it and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this, they're not just for watching, they're for healing. This story is a work of fiction created for emotional storytelling and reflection purposes only. While the characters, situations, and events are designed to feel realistic and relatable, they are not based on any specific real individuals or actual legal cases. Any resemblance to real people or real-life situations is purely coincidental. The narrative explores themes such as relationships, personal growth, accountability, and healing after emotional hardship. It is not intended to provide legal, financial, or psychological advice. Real-life outcomes, especially in matters like custody or professional consequences, can vary widely depending on individual circumstances and local laws. This content is meant to inspire thought, empathy, and conversation, not to represent factual events or guarantee similar results in real life.